Okay, let's dive into this. Welcome to today's Explainer, where we are looking at the truly extraordinary life, the expansive acting career, and the deeply personal, often challenging journey of Hayden Panettiere. You know, the world was recently heartbroken by the tragic news that Hayden passed away at just 36 years old. So in this Explainer, we are going to honor her life story. We'll trace her steps from a child actor to a global television superstar and ultimately to a woman who bravely owned her most vulnerable truths. To really ground our understanding of who Hayden was, we have to look to the poignant statement released by her father, Skip Panettiere, shortly after her passing. He shared, "It is with profound sadness that we share the tragic passing of our beloved Hayden. She was an incredible light and a force of nature who brought immeasurable love and joy to all who knew her, and to the millions who watched her on screen." It's just a beautifully moving tribute, and it perfectly sets the tone for our look into her legacy, reminding us of the profound human being behind all those famous roles.
Section 1. Early Stardom, from commercials to the big screen. To really understand her massive footprint in Hollywood, let's move to and see how this builds. Because Hayden's career didn't start in her teens. It actually started before she could even walk. At literally 11 months old, she appeared in her first commercial for a play school toy train. Then, as she grew up in the 1990s, she became an absolute staple on daytime television, holding her own in classic soap operas like One Life to Live and Guiding Light. But the real breakthrough? The moment audiences everywhere recognized her undeniable talent? That happened in the year 2000 with the major Hollywood film Remember the Titans. Playing the opinionated, football-obsessed daughter of the coach, Sheryl Yoast, was a huge defining moment for a 10-year-old Hayden. She held this immense fondness for the experience, later reflecting on it by saying, "I mean, you have no idea how many times in my life I've wished and prayed to go back to Remember the Titans." She described it as just a time of pure joy, surrounded by a super supportive cast, and it truly cemented her status as a rising star on the big screen. Section 2, Breakout Star, Saving the World on Heroes.
Her transition from a successful child actor to a bona fide global household name happened in a flash. If you watched television in the mid-2000s, you absolutely know this phrase, "Save the cheerleader, save the world." It was the cultural mantra of NBC's smash hit sci-fi series, Heroes. Hayden stepped into the role of Claire Bennet, the indestructible high school cheerleader. The show was an absolute phenomenon, perfectly blending reality with superhero sci-fi, and it propelled Hayden to a completely new echelon of global fame. I mean, it earned her 3 Teen Choice Awards and literally made her the face of a television revolution. Now, what's really interesting and honestly a bit heartbreaking is the stark contrast this era presented. While the world saw an indestructible superhero on screen, the reality for a teenage Hayden was entirely different. The sudden explosive fame meant she was relentlessly tracked by paparazzi. She later recalled the first time she was chased down by photographers. As a young actress, she thought she'd want to look chic for that moment, but the actual reality, she described it as sheer terror. It's a sobering reminder of the very real cracks and intense pressures that come with child and teen stardom.
Section 3. The Nashville Era, Art Imitating Life.
Moving right into her 20s, Hayden took on a role that would prove her immense versatility and maturity as a performer. In 2012, she was cast as Juliette Barnes, the brash, incredibly talented country upstart on the hit drama Nashville. And listen, this wasn't just an acting gig. It was a total musical triumph. Over the show's run across ABC and CMT, Hayden actually performed her own singing. She didn't just pretend to be a country star. She legitimately placed 11 songs on the Billboard Hot Country charts and even toured the US. Her captivating, super complex performance earned her 2 Golden Globe nominations for Best Supporting Actress. And this brilliantly illustrates the heavy, poignant parallel that defined her time on the show. On screen, the writers gave her character, Juliette, incredibly dark, challenging storylines, including severe postpartum depression and alcoholism. But off-screen, Hayden was quietly, desperately battling those exact same demons in her real life, following the birth of her daughter in 2014. The boundary between her character's scripted trauma and her own private reality completely blurred. In a remarkably candid 2022 interview on Good Morning America, Hayden laid bare just how difficult that period was for her. She said, "I didn't know where the alcoholism was ending and the postpartum was beginning, and I ran myself pretty ragged." It takes an incredible amount of strength to vocalize that kind of pain, right? To admit out loud that the lines of mental health and addiction were so entangled that she just couldn't see a way out at the time.
Section 4. A Candid Journey, Owning Her Story.
Despite the darkness, Hayden's later years were truly defined by her courageous decision to take control. Let's look at the timeline of her compounding challenges to truly grasp what she navigated here. In 2014, she welcomed her daughter Kaya with her then-fiancé heavyweight champion boxer Vladimir Klitschko. But by 2015, while still actively filming Nashville, the weight just became too much and she entered rehab. Fast forward to 2018, as she continued to struggle with what she described as a horrible cycle of depression, anxiety, and substance abuse, the agonizing decision was made for her daughter to live full-time in Ukraine with Klitschko.
It is absolutely vital that we look at her personal agency during this time. As she so powerfully told Women's Health in 2023, "I was the one who put myself in the first treatment center. I was drowning." She didn't hide behind a publicist's carefully crafted statement. She openly admitted she needed a lifeline and took the terrifying, brave step to get help.
You know, during this incredibly vulnerable time, she was subject to brutal, sensationalized headlines claiming she had just simply abandoned her daughter. Hayden addressed this hurtful misconception head-on during a podcast interview. She stated clearly, "I think there's been this very common misconception that I just gave up my child. That could not be farther from the truth." She explained that agreeing to let her daughter live with her father was the absolute most heartbreaking, difficult decision she ever made, but it was necessary while she tried to find her way out of the darkness and heal herself.
As if navigating all of that recovery wasn't hard enough, Hayden's world was shattered yet again in February 2023. Her younger brother, fellow actor Hayden Panettiere, died suddenly at just 28 years old due to an enlarged heart and aortic valve complications. The absolute suddenness of this loss profoundly compounded the immense grief she was already carrying. True to her candid nature, Hayden spoke openly about the agonizing reality of familial loss. Reflecting on Jansen's passing, she said, "No matter how many years go by, I will never get over his loss." She let the world see her heartbreak, showing us that some grief isn't meant to get over, but simply carried with you. All of this, the dizzying highs of childhood stardom, the creative triumphs of her adult acting career, and the devastating lows of addiction and loss, culminated in her raw memoir, This Is Me, A Reckoning, published in May of 2026. In it, she fiercely protected the people in her life, totally refusing to drag others through the mud. But when it came to her own truth about trauma, domestic abuse, postpartum depression, and her recovery, she was completely fearless and unapologetic. She reclaimed her story, entirely on her own terms. Section 5. Legacy of a Light. Remembering Hayden. So, the crucial point is, how do we bring this all together?
When we look at the sum of her 36 years, Hayden Panettiere leaves behind a beautifully multifaceted legacy. On the screen, she was a beloved child star who grew into a legendary sci-fi icon on Heroes and eventually proved herself as a phenomenal Golden Globe-nominated dramatic actress and charting singer on Nashville. But off the screen, her legacy is arguably even more powerful. She was a brave, unapologetic advocate who utilized her own deep struggles to destigmatize mental health and addiction recovery for everyone else. And that brings us to our final thought today, leaving us with a profound question. How will we remember the indestructible cheerleader who bravely shared her most vulnerable, human struggles with the world? Hayden Panettiere showed us that true strength really isn't about being invulnerable like Claire Bennet. It's about having the immense courage to ask for help, to speak your truth, and to find the light, even in the very darkest of times. Thank you for joining me for this explainer, as we remember a true force of nature.